There's a peculiar dissonance in the global narrative today. Western nations passionately advocate for female empowerment and racial equality on international platforms. They champion these causes, often tying aid and development assistance to a country's progress in these areas.
This advocacy, while noble in its intent, rings hollow when juxtaposed against their own realities. How can these nations, with their considerable influence, reconcile their global pronouncements with their domestic realities? The answer is complex, intertwined with historical legacies, power dynamics, and societal structures.
What is clear, however, is that this perceived hypocrisy undermines the message of equality and empowerment. It breeds cynicism and skepticism, particularly in regions like Africa, which have long borne the brunt of such inconsistencies. This is not to say that the pursuit of gender and racial equality is inherently flawed. These are fundamental human rights, essential for building just and equitable societies.
The issue lies in the selective application of these principles. It lies in the West's tendency to position itself as a beacon of progress while overlooking its own shortcomings. This double standard erodes trust and casts a shadow of doubt on the true intentions behind these global campaigns. The absence of female presidents and the stark underrepresentation of racial minorities in the highest echelons of power in many Western nations speak volumes. It begs the question, if these nations truly believe in the leadership capabilities of women and people of color, why are these groups still conspicuously absent from the helm of power?
Some argue that this disparity is merely a reflection of societal biases, slow to change but not indicative of a deliberate exclusion. Others point to systemic barriers, deeply ingrained within political systems, that hinder the ascension of women and minorities. Whatever the reasons, the optics are undeniable.
The message sent to the world, particularly to developing nations, is one of contradiction. It fosters a sense of disillusionment, a feeling that the rules of the game are different for some. This perceived hypocrisy undermines the West's credibility as a champion of equality. Africa has long been a recipient of Western aid and development interventions, many aimed at promoting economic growth and social progress. However, these interventions have often been based on Western models and ideologies, failing to adequately consider the continent's unique context and complexities. The result has been a litany of well-intentioned but ultimately failed policies.
Take, for instance, the numerous agricultural projects implemented across Africa. Many, despite being well-funded and driven by a desire to improve food security, ended up disrupting traditional farming practices and creating dependency on external inputs. These projects, while well-meaning, often failed to grasp the nuances of local agricultural systems, leading to unintended consequences.
Similarly, educational initiatives, while crucial for human capital development, have sometimes prioritized Western models over indigenous knowledge systems. This can lead to a disconnect between education and local needs, failing to equip individuals with the skills necessary to thrive in their own environments. Section 4, Structural Adjustment Programs, a Legacy of Debt and Dependency. The 1980s and 1990s saw the rise of structural adjustment programs, or SAPs, implemented by international financial institutions like the World Bank and IMF.
These programs, often a precondition for receiving loans and aid, pushed for market liberalization, privatization, and austerity measures. While touted as a means to stimulate economic growth, SAPs had devastating consequences for many African countries.
These programs, implemented with little regard for local contexts, led to the dismantling of social safety nets, cuts in public spending, and increased poverty.
Privatization often resulted in job losses and reduced access to essential services. The legacy of SAPs continues to haunt many African nations, contributing to debt burdens, economic instability, and social unrest.
The SAP era underscores a critical point. Development solutions cannot be one-size-fits-all prescriptions imposed from the outside. They need to be context-specific, locally owned, and driven by a genuine understanding of local realities. Section 5. The Shadow of History. Questioning Intentions and Impacts. The history of colonialism, with its exploitation, resource extraction, and cultural disruption, casts a long shadow on the relationship between the West and Africa.
This history fuels skepticism towards external interventions, no matter how well-intentioned they may seem. The legacy of colonialism is evident in the economic structures that persist today, where many African nations remain exporters of raw materials, their economies vulnerable to fluctuations in global commodity prices.
This dependence on external markets limits their ability to chart their own development paths.
The evangelical missions, often seen as an arm of Western cultural influence, also raise questions. While some argue for their positive contributions to education and healthcare, others criticize their role in undermining traditional belief systems and perpetuating a sense of cultural inferiority.
Section 6, Towards African Agency, a future built on self-reliance and authentic partnerships. The path forward for Africa lies in embracing self-reliance, in fostering internally driven development solutions that prioritize local knowledge, resources, and aspirations.
This shift requires a move away from dependency on external aid and interventions towards genuine partnerships based on mutual respect and shared benefits. Africa is not a monolith. It's a continent teeming with diversity, innovation, and resilience.
Its people possess the knowledge, skills, and determination to chart their own course. What is needed is the space and support to unleash this potential.
This is not to say that external engagement is inherently negative. On the contrary, well-structured partnerships based on equality and mutual benefit can be invaluable. However, these partnerships need to be driven by African priorities, designed to empower local communities and committed to sustainable long-term solutions.
The time has come for a paradigm shift, for a move away from the paternalistic approach of the past towards a future where African voices are heard, where African solutions are at the forefront, and where Africa's potential is fully realized.